Hi, I'm Kerry Dawborn, co-editor with Caroline Smith of Permaculture Pioneers, Stories from the New Frontier. Permaculture Pioneers gives a history of the first 30 years of permaculture. It explores what we can learn about personal transformation towards sustainability through the personal stories of some of Australia's best known and also some more everyday permies, who each in their own ways have made an extraordinary contribution.
What really motivated you and Caroline to begin work on this book?
We were really interested in what motivates people to think that they can stand against the tide, for example, because if you live in a world in which things work in a particular way, and it can be very difficult to start to do things in a different way. And if you're coming from a perspective which is about the idea that nature is there to be used and dominated, then you will tend to create a world that reflects that. But if you're coming out of a perspective that is recognising that we actually need to cooperate with nature, we need to understand nature better, then you will tend to do the things that you do out of that frame of thinking. But it can be really difficult to be the one person who stands up there and sort of says, I'm going to, what's that thing in Monty Python? We are all individuals. I'm not. This kind of thing probably leads in some people on the one hand to a sense of numbness, that you just switch off because you feel you can't make a change. So you just continue with the way you are and you blind yourself to what's actually going on.
And permaculture, of course, is a way of, if you like, bringing our everyday lives more into line with the ethics we hold in the heart.
Because it is a design system for the sustainable human settlements that begins with a set of ethics: earth care, people care, fair share, and works with a set of principles as to how to enact these ethics in our lives and in our designs. It starts with our intention. You add intention to design, design to intention. And then from the design you take action. Out of that you create the future.
And I like in the book where you talked about, I think it was Mohammed Yunus, is it?
Mohammed Yunus is a person who began the microcredit movement in Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, I forget.
Right.
And he saw that there was a need. There were people who were ultra poor, who were unable to get any kind of a loan from a bank. But he realised that it would take such a small amount of money to make a difference, a really significant difference in these people's lives. But in that interview with Andrew Denton, there was this energy that he had that was just fantastic. It was exactly what I would like to see in the world, in everybody. It was that glint where he's coming from a place of love and connectedness and wholeness, because he's found a way to live his integrity and bring his ethics into line with what he believes.
Kerry, how does permaculture help us deal with complexity? You talk in the book about the interconnected webs and observing the many causes and effects of a perceived problem. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I think the thing about permaculture is that it is about systems thinking. So it teaches us to look at relationships between things, the elements in a system, whether or not how your chickens are working in relation to your fruit trees in your orchard, and what the role of weeds might be in a system in helping improve the soil. It brings together all these different elements, and it teaches people how to think in that way. So when you start to understand that connections are really where it's at, and that's where you build resilience, and that's where the richness and the high productivity comes from in any system, you take that same kind of thinking and you transfer it to other areas of your life, in your work or in other things, whether it's in government or whatever. We can take that same kind of thinking and apply it there.
So you're trying to get away from that linear thinking to approaching life as if it is more of a web and understanding the complexities of all those little links between elements in a system.
if we set up a system that doesn't really facilitate walking or riding a bike or using public transport, but actually favours driving a car instead, the connection between driving a car and not getting enough exercise is there whether or not we take it into account or not. So the problem of increasing obesity in society is going to happen. It's just, we've designed it into that, whether we've been aware of it or not.
Going back to the book, what do you think the readers will get from reading these author stories from the 25 contributors?
That people had found a way to bring their ethics into line, to bring their everyday lives into line with the ethics that they held in their hearts, so that they weren't living a contradiction anymore. They were able to live what they believed in, and that was really critically important. Another thing was many of them had been fighting something. They had been fighting the nuclear problem, or they had been standing for Indigenous rights or women's rights or other things. But permaculture gave them a way to begin to build something and stop fighting, because so many of them were exhausted. So that was really important. And I suppose another thing is the sense that these are just ordinary people like you and I, and if they can do it, so can I.
You talked in the book about them feeling really empowered and able to live for themselves once they got into permaculture.
And I think one of the things that was really important to me was the realisation we tend to rely a lot on experts, and yet many of these areas of knowledge, whether it's growing food, building houses, working in community, these are our cultural inheritance. That permaculture tends to produce people who are jacks of all trades or Jills of all trades, who learn not necessarily to turn their hand to absolutely everything, but to believe that they can. Yeah. And obviously some people are more able to do certain things than others, but the point is that we don't need to keep separating things out.
And lastly, of course, the other thing you'll get out of the book is it's a history, isn't it, of the start of the movement and where it's up to today.
That's right, and for many people this is one of the big attractions of the book. It traces the history, starting with the David Holmgren's story of his working relationship with Bill Mollison, and also where he was coming from in his life before that, his family background and his thinking. And although Bill did not contribute to the book, you get a really good sense of the kind of person that Bill Mollison is and the kind of contribution he has made, because so many of the authors talk about the incredible passion and drive that he has. And in some cases it's quite funny, because there's those who are really inspired and in a really great way, and there were others who were shocked into changing the way they see the world and the way they see their role in the world. The other thing that comes through is that there's a couple of different generations, maybe 3 different generations of contributors. There are the people who were the early uptakers of permaculture, and then there were people who came along maybe 10 or 15 years later, and then there is a whole other generation of younger people like Josh Byrne or Tony Jansen. Permaculture, although it started in Australia, is now practiced worldwide in 160 or more countries. And I just can't wait to see what other stories are going to come out. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm hoping that this will be the start of that.
So am I, Kerry. That was a fantastic interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.